Hello everyone, well this is a bit of a late live update on the GGR just to get you up to speed and tell you a few things that are going on. So with the question and answers, of course, I've got a few, there's about 8 or 9 questions. Questions are slowly getting smaller because the event is winding down. We've only got 3 sailors out there, and in fact there's still plenty of things happening for those 3. So far so good for Uku. He hasn't caught any more fish, but he had 3, and those 3 he gets about 3 days worth of food out of each fish. And that meant that he's saved nearly 9 days of eating his rations, which is kind of good because it looks like he's going to be a week later than he expected on his ETA. It's still a bit up and down because there's storms up there, and after I finish this I'll do a live tracker update so you'll see the weather of what's going on. But he was going to run out of food a week before he arrived, but now because he hasn't eaten any of that food for those 9 days, I think he's going to be okay. So it's a bit more relaxed in that sense. But I think there's going to be a few shocked people when we see him. I'm quite confident he's lost a lot of weight because he was getting a bit thinner in Hobart, so we'll have to wait and see. Then for Istvan, that was the story of the week. We thought he was doing okay. He was sort of holding his own with Uku, and then we all knew he had steering problems with his main pedestal steering. The bevel gear's not working. He made up the emergency tiller. Everything was going well. He was making good speed, and then all of a sudden we got the message yesterday that some of you may have seen that his emergency tiller has failed. So he couldn't use it, and I think what's happened is probably the timber piece that was holding the 2 tubes together has broken. He's got no more epoxy glue to fix that, so it means he has no emergency tiller, and he doesn't really want to use the main steering pedestal because it works, but he wants to save that as long as he can because he knows that the whole thing's likely to fail any time. So he said that he's going to try and steer the boat by using the sails, which is possible. And the first question I've got is about that subject. So I'll come to that in a minute and show you how you can actually steer your boat without any steering, just using the sails. But you can't do it with the wind coming downwind. So there's still a few issues there. And we're not quite sure what he's doing. He's sent a couple of messages and he's just gone through some bad weather. He said he's just shook out the 3rd reef. So in heavy weather, the bigger the seas are, the boat gets bounced around as well. So we're still a little bit unsure exactly what's going on. But he sent that message and said that the chance of his survival wasn't good. Not survival in the sense of life and death survival, but survival to get to the end of the race and still be in the GGR class, because if his steering becomes a major problem, then he's going to have to stop somewhere and repair it. He won't be able to repair it himself because he needs extra stuff that he doesn't have. And the one thing we haven't spoken a lot about is that he does have an emergency rudder. Everyone in the GGR has to show that they can actually steer the boat without using the ship's rudder. Now, Istvan's rudder is okay, but he just can't connect anything to it to steer the boat. So the rudder he's got is like it's relatively small. It's about that wide, and it's yay long, and it fits on brackets on the back of the transom. It's a commercial item that's sold by the same manufacturer as the Wind Pilot, and I saw it on the back. He was given a bit of a dispensation to trial it because some other engines had trialed it, and the system seems to work. But it's the sort of thing that you can use to get to the nearest port, but not necessarily get you all the way home to Les Sables d'Olonne. So even if he had to fit that emergency rudder, it's not perfect. It's still demanding to use it. It's very small for the power of the boat and things like that. But it could and should allow him to get into the Azores. He can't make it across to the Canaries. If he had to alter course to the Canaries are upwind and it'd just take too long. So he is committed now. The only place he's got to stop, the next place is going to be the Azores, which is still a long way off. And in the next few days, you'll see it's going to get hammered by a huge storm. That's with the big winds, like forecast 70 knots, 75 knots. But that's ahead of both of them. So it's not going to cause them problems, but it'll affect the weather for Uku. So it's really more of watch this space for Istvan. Hopefully he can get through. He's been struggling all the way, and he's still not over. For Tapio today, he's not going anywhere in a hurry. He's still only doing 2.5 knots, dragging those huge barnacles. They've got really big now. On the phone call that we got, we heard that the clumps on the bottom of the keel are between 20 centimetres, like yay big, and 30 centimetres, which is nearly 12 inches. They're actually growing on top of each other, and that creates huge amount of drag. Not to mention the patches and the areas over the hull. And in Hobart, there were 3 areas where there was quite a solid infestation, and they would have got a lot worse by now. but he's adamant he will not go in the water. He's worried about sharks. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. The one little plug here, the coins, there's 3 coins left. 3 coins. I said I'd never bring it up again on Facebook, but it's not a written post. So the lucky last 3 of the 100 that are going to go out, and that's with the limited edition poster. So I'll go straight into, the other thing, Mark Slats has been having a great time. He left here. He's just set sail again. He sailed over to Falmouth, and he met up with the Lord Mayor there in Falmouth. There was quite a little reception when he got to the marina. He caught up with friends there, said g'day to Susie, and had a great time. So now he's just left Falmouth and he's sailing up the coast further along. He's going to stop off and meet Ayrton, who withdrew from the race. He was one of the first to retire and has now re-entered 22, so he's going to catch up with them, and he'll catch up with Sir Robin as well and have dinner, and he's enjoying the company. And then after he's done all that, he'll head across to hometown, and they're planning a big party for when he gets there. He's back on the tracker now, so you can follow him in the progress along, and I'm sure that everyone will be keen to welcome him home finally when he gets there. Okay, so we'll go straight into the questions, and the first question was from Gerard Choisnet. How do you steer with sails and no rudder? Well, I just happen to have my carrot here and a biro. So let's just call this carrot a boat, okay? And we'll call the biro the mast, and this is the front of the carrot or the front of the boat, and this is the back. So obviously you have a mainsail back here and you have a head sail there. Basically, and if you remember one thing with a sail, if you ease the sheets, the sails, say the wind's coming from you to me, the sails are back here and they're just flogging the mainsail. If you pull the sheet on, the mainsail goes like that. If you ease the sheet off, there's nothing. And the same with the head sail here. If there's a head sail there, if I ease the sheets, the sail is going to be flogging in the breeze, and if I pull the sheet in, it takes the pressure. So if you just remember now, the sails are flogging, there's nothing there. If I've got the sail, the front sail, and I pull the sheet on, as I pull that on, the wind is hitting the sail here, and it's basically pushing the carrot away like that, because the wind on the sail pushes it that way. That's assuming there's no pressure on the main. So now we let the sheet go on the head sail part, and the mainsail's flogging. If we just pull the main sheet on and get some pressure at the back of the carrot or the back of the boat, the back of the boat's going to turn this way, okay? So you can see I can apply pressure on the back of the boat or the front of the boat, which changes the direction. So if you want to steer by sails, you've got to balance your sails, and the more pressure you put on the back sail, the main sail, the more the back of the boat's going to pull away, so that's going to steer that way. And vice versa, if you ease the main off and put more tension on the head sail sheet, it's going to push the bow away so you can go this way. So balancing the sails is a simple principle which you can use even if your steering is working, because if you're steering with your tiller or your wheel and you find the boat, you've got all this helm on, then you've probably got your sails way out of balance, which could be slow, right? You could be creating drag. So you always want to try and balance your sails anyway. The hard part now is that's easy if the wind is on your beam here and you want to go that way. But you imagine now if I'm this way and I've got the sails here, you've got less latitude to actually cause the pressure difference to steer the boat. So it's possible and it's achievable. You want to try it one day if you've got a boat, to balance your sails and get the boat steering by itself without touching the wheel. But it gets very difficult when you're downwind, and it also gets difficult when you've got a big sea, because the sea comes along, smacks the bow of the boat away, and it's got to compensate and all those sorts of things. So so it's not so easy, but that's how you do it, just varying the pressure front to back and so on. But it's a last resort thing for if you've got no tiller. James Buscard wants to know the whole question. In fact, he's got 3 questions, and they're all good ones, I must say. The first one is, what's the better, the hard dodger or soft dodger? And going into this GGR, I always assumed that a hard dodger would be better. But I've got to say, Jean-Luc changed my mind on all of that, because you can save weight with a lighter dodger. You can also put the dodger down, you know, with a material dodger. You can fold everything down, get the thing off, so there's nothing there in a storm, it's less windage. And you carry a spare cover, so if it's up and it does smack a wave and it tears, you can always put your spare cover up. So I'm starting to come around to the idea that a soft dodger is pretty cool, because you can get some big waves and big pressures and so on. I think at the end of the day, it comes up to individual choice, you know, what you might want to do. They've both got advantages, disadvantages. The thing I really liked about Jean-Luc is he extended his tiller and he put the curtains down the back so he could get inside there. Has a little slot, so it's not perfectly sealed, but he can sit in shelter and steer, and he's got everything happening there. And there's different designs. You probably saw Mark Slat's. He had a little one over the companionway. I prefer a bigger one if I've got one, because it gives you all the protection from the weather, and you can sit out rather than have to sit in the cockpit all the time. But a lot of personal choice there. The other question he had was on companionway doors or storm boards. Now, storm boards, you just drop them in, boom, 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 one after the other, and you slide your hatch back. A companionway door, you probably saw Susie, she's got a hatch on an angle, and she can just open it, jump in, shut it, and it's completely 100% watertight. Storm boards and sliding hatches in a rollover and things like that, they're not as watertight. You'll always get water coming in around the edges and so on, and even spray, and they're harder to put in and out, you know, like there's a lot more motion of getting one board, two board, or slide the hatch back, and if you're trying to do it in a hurry, it's not as good. So ideally, a door is better, but again, there's different ways of doing it, and GGR, it's free. You can modify your companionways any way you like to keep it safe. It's a big safety thing. You know that Mark Slat's storm boards got burst open by a wave. He had spare sets. I like a door if you can manage it, but personal choice again. The final one was about boom brakes or preventers. Now, if I come back to the Carrot, and you've got the mast here, you've got a boom on it, so let's just say this is the boom. You're sailing downwind, you don't want to jibe, so you want to lock the boom in position, and a preventer runs a line, if this is the bow of the boat, runs a line from the end of the boom forward to the bow, and that holds it there, stops it flopping around, okay, because it's held back on tension by the main sheet. The problem I find if you're using a preventer is that it's fixed solid, and then when you get the rolling and this hits the water, something's got to give, because it can drag in the water and that line's fixed and it can't go anywhere. It's high risk for the boom, right? You can't go anywhere, you might break the boom or whatever, and setting up a preventer means that when you do jibe across, you've got this big long line, you've got to connect another one on the other side. So I always prefer a boom brake. Now all that is, it's a device hanging underneath the boom about halfway down, and it's got a coil on it, and you run a line from both sides of the boat. So it comes up from one side, wraps around the boom brake underneath the boom, and goes to the other side with one control line back at the cockpit. And the idea is, if you pull that line really tight, it'll clam, the rope will wrap around the boom brake and lock it solid, so the boom can't move, right? So it's doing the same thing as a preventer, but the beauty is that if the boom hits the water, okay, it'll override the boom brake depending on how much tension you've got. So you can set the tension enough to stop it flopping in the sea, but if it hits the water, it's going to give a bit. It'll slide back, goes, slides back. Or if you do a crash jibe, you know, the boat slews around, the wind gets on the other side, sometimes you want it actually to come across, because you can get caught inside out with a preventer, and the loads are phenomenal. And if you've got to try and let a solid preventer line go into the bow, you've got to let that go. Sometimes it can get really tricky, because the whole thing's going to want to rip out of the thing or whatever. It's with the boom brake, you can vary the tension and let it do its own thing. So again, it's a subject you need to Google and get into it, but I always sail with a boom brake. You know, I've never had a monohull that doesn't have a boom brake. Multi-hull is different because you've got a long main sheet traveller and you can lock it down and stuff, different form of sailing. But yeah, I personally prefer a boom brake. There's a lot of boom brakes in the GGR, and have a look at them. They can save your head, you know, big time. So Sandy Rafferty was wondering about Tapio cleaning his barnacles. She saw that he might have to clean his barnacles anyway to get into French waters. Now, I'm not sure whether that's the case. Certainly was in the case of Australian quarantine, because Australia is an island. It's got very strict biosecurity, and as we found out, and couldn't do it. In France, even when the sailors left to sail away from France, they didn't really need to do a port clearance or a customs immigration clearance, because they were going out for a sail, and you can just come back and you don't have to enter. When the other guys entered, you know, Mark and Jean-Luc, no customs, no immigration, no nothing. You just turn up. It's a different system over here, and so I think quarantine's probably the same. So I think Tapio can arrive, and later on they'll slip the boat and get rid of the goose barnacles. They come from the ocean. Most countries have got them, so it's not there. It's just that Australia's particularly strict on those sorts of things. Because Sandy was saying, oh, you better stop somewhere and clean them off, and he should do it now anyway, go into a bay. Well, you've got to remember, Tapio doesn't have an engine either, and I think if he had an engine, I think you would probably see he would be thinking about that, or he might have thought about it somewhere where he is now. or later on. But because he doesn't have an engine, it's very hard for him to sail into a bay and anchor and then get over the side and clean it. So he's going to bring him all the way home. He's not interested in diving with sharks and all that sort of stuff. So those barnacles are coming here, and someone might offer to buy them. They're quite a delicacy here apparently as well. So okay, Marion Shirley wanted to know, we haven't heard anything about Istvan's nails, you know, the hairs growing under his nails and the mould for a number of days. Is that good news or bad news? And I think really he hasn't brought it up because he's got too many other issues, that's all. I think the best we could have hoped with the material that's on the boat is not to fix the problem, but to stabilise it and not let it get any worse. So, but I think he's got bigger issues on the go at the moment. That's the only reason he hasn't done it. John Castex was asking when the boats have been rolled over, like Susie and the others, he thought that the turnbuckles, they're the wire adjusters that connect to the chain plates. So you have the chain plates, then you have turnbuckles or bottle screws that adjust the length of the wires, and then you have the wires. I was wondering, oh, when the boat gets rolled over, these turnbuckles are getting ripped off. It's not good. Can we fix it? No, that's not the case. When the boat goes over and the rigs are gone, the wire is usually connected still. Those turnbuckles don't come off because they're solid links. Some of the wire may break, but most of it's still there, and Susie and the others had to get up and cut those wires. They have to have bolt cutters, and they have hacksaws and plenty of spare blades. They cut the wires to get rid of the mast as quick as they can before it puts a hole in the boat, and that's how it would have happened. So the turnbuckles are fine. One thing Susie did say, I believe, in the conversations we had, was the possibility that maybe one of her chain plates had ripped out, and I'm not sure on that. I haven't had a discussion with her about her rig. I know Robin, Sir Robin Knox-Johnson has, and he's been speaking to, in fact, he's spoken to virtually all the entrants now that have been involved with that, and he also spoke by phone. We got the entrants, we got Uku, Tapio and Istvan to ring Sir Robin yesterday and give him a bit of an interview on, you know, just explain heavy weather taxis and things they've done. So that report and review will now go back to all the entrants once he's finished with that for final comments. We'll get to see it as well, make comments, and then it'll go back to Sir Robin and he'll finalise that, and it'll be released soon. Okay, so I know there's a huge interest in that, so that's all happening. Okay, Apo Verta wanted to know how far in the future do I believe that the windy TY weather forecasts are accurate? It's an interesting point. And there's a classic case now to watch on the tracker. There's this big storm coming. It's going to go over the Azores. I've noticed it from 3 days ago now. It's really intense. It's going to intensify. Forecast winds in the centres around 75 knots. And generally windy is pretty good. There's certain things that are hard to predict, the final movement and direction, but it's certainly good at picking the various you know, systems that are coming. But obviously, the further out you go, if you're 10 days out, anything can happen. If you're 7 days out, things happen. If you're 3 days out, it might happen. You know what I mean? So it's very hard to be definitive. Every situation is different because it depends how many other factors are influencing that weather. We live in Tonga on a little island called Namukiiki, and crikey's, the weather, you know, a week ago, there was 10 days of bad weather where there could have been 3 cyclones in a row. There were these lows, tropical lows coming in. Climate change is really impacting all over the place, but windy's been very good. We've been working that, and it's quite successful, and even with their cyclone forecasting. So I'd say generally it's better than doing that, and it's pretty accurate. You know, there's 2 models there to look at, but I'm very happy with windy. It's a very good place to go to get forecasting. Okay, Linus Wilson was wondering what did Uku do to repair his runners. Basically, the one that was up there, apparently the wire just broke by the terminal, so he had to go up the mast, pull all that apart to get the scraps off, came down, got an old runner, and basically put the old runner up, clevis pin, split rings, all that sort of stuff, or split pins. So it was a traditional replacement of wire rigging, but when you're at sea, it makes it more demanding. And it was an old one that was on board because the old ones have been replaced with new ones, and he still carried them just in case that sort of thing happened. And often the things with runners, it's not the work, and the reason they break isn't the one that's on load. When the runner is on load, the wire's doing exactly what it's meant to. Often it's the one that's not loaded that's just flopping in the breeze if you don't strap it down. The wire work hardens, right? So it's all moving these little bits of movements, and slowly but surely it work hardens. Then the next time you pull it on, bing, you get a few strands going. So if you have got runners, make sure you strap them down. The less movement of any wire is really important because it stops it work hardening. Robert Reynolds. It was about Jean-Luc's hydrovane. He cut down the size of his rudder. Now, a hydrovane is an auxiliary rudder steering system, wind vane self-steering system, so it has a flip-flop vane, and it has a rudder in the water. So Jean-Luc locks his ship's rudder so it can't move, and then the hydrovane rudder actually steers the boat at the back of the boat. And so what he did is he cut the bottom of the rudder off. I think he cut off about yay much of the rudder. It's quite quite big, and it's sort of yay wide. It's a proper little ship's rudder. Not as big as the ship's rudder, but because it's further back, it's right the way back, it's got more leverage, so it can afford to be smaller. And a standard system, they only basically have two sizes of rudders, right? And the smaller size isn't much smaller than the big one. So even with a small one, it'll still steer a boat that's 50 feet, or bigger, and 50, 55 feet. With the big rudder, the hydrovane is probably good for a 60-footer, 65-foot boat, for complete self-steering. Anywhere you want to go. It's a fantastic unit. And Jean-Luc immediately thought, well, if it's good enough to steer a big boat, why do I need a big rudder? So he cut a bit off, and the reason he cut that off, it's just called wetted surface area and drag. Anything you've got in the water is creating drag. And so by pulling that little bit of the rudder off the bottom, he figures that I've only got a 36-foot boat, so I can afford to have a little bit less rudder, and that's just that much less drag of this thing going through the water for 210 days, and every little bit counts, and that's the reason he cut it off. He is absolutely, completely 100% impressed with the hydrovane. I've seen a letter, an email that he sent to hydrovane at the end of the race, just saying how good it was. That's the bottom line. It never let him down. The only thing that he did to it caused a problem, and what he did is there's a standard pin that goes in the rudder shaft, and that pin is just used if you get into a marina and you want to take the rudder off. You just pull this pin out and you slip the rudder off and put it in a locker. Or if you're motoring and reversing all the time and things like that and you don't want the rudder in the water, that's how you take the rudder off. And Jean-Luc said, I don't need to take it off. So he puts his rudder on, and he put a bolt in, a special stainless steel bolt with a nut and washer. The bolt wasn't strong enough. After I don't know, 8,000 miles or something, 10,000 miles, that bolt broke. So he then went over and replaced it with the original pin. Original pin never failed for the rest of the trip. But as far as the vane was concerned, it was fantastic. Didn't miss a beat. He's happy as, and I think you'll see a lot more of him in 22 on boats. So why wouldn't you? Okay, so it was successful, and that's the reason he did it, just to save dragging the water. Noel de Biscuit, Noel de Biscuit is asking whether Istvan still has to serve his time penalty in the box. He still has to have the time penalty. That was accrued because he pulled into a port back in the Atlantic. You may remember he thought he was going to have to get a new wind vane flowing in because the wind pilot wasn't doing so well, and he wanted a monitor and da-da-da-da-da. And so he ended up getting a 24-hour time penalty to stay in the GGR class, and he was very happy with that. Normally he would do the time box penalty at 20 degrees north, but because of all these steering issues, we considered the smartest thing to do. There's no real benefit to anyone, or no real disadvantage to anyone, if we add that penalty time now to the end of his overall finishing time. So we're not going to ask him to serve the time penalty in the penalty box. He sails straight to the finish, and it'll be added to his finishing time, and that's in the spirit of the GGR. Okay, last question. John Castex want to know how come Tapio is going so fast and dragging the barnacles, and even Uku and Istvan. Well, Uku's got no barnacles. He's been clearing the barnacles. He's been diving. Istvan's got a few, but nowhere near as many as Tapio. Tapio's got truckloads. And when you see him going fast, it's just an issue of how much sail area, how much wind, and just go for it. So when he's doing 5.5 knots, it's not because he was asking whether he's a good racing sailor. I said, no, it's not really a racing sailor. It's just if you get a big breeze coming, you just drag them through the water. So the drag is always there, and that's a reality. It's a fact of life. Now, just the final one I thought I'd do, but a lot of people have asked what are some of the things that are going to change for GGR in 22. I just put a post up, or put a a message out to the GGR interested entrants. We've got a group of about 150 people that are on a private page or a closed group. These are people that are thinking about GGR 22. We've got a lot of entries coming in now for 22, and you'll see them come up. We were going to put them up earlier, but we're holding off because there's still things happening with this edition of the race, but they'll be up in April. You'll get to see who's coming, and there's some very interesting people that are signing on. But I'll just give you a quick run through, just quick read for those that are still there watching on some of the things that we're doing. First of all, I can tell you unofficially now, the start date is going to change again. We're discussing all sorts of things with Les Sables d'Olonne about the next edition in 22 here. It's not finished yet. Nothing's agreed, but we have agreed that the date for the start will be now on Sunday the 4th of September. Okay, in 2022. So if it's starting here, and I'm hoping it will, it'll be Sunday the 4th of September. The race village will open on the 20th of August, and the celebration of Bernard Matessia's start in that edition will be on Monday the 22nd of August in the race village. A few little things. 4-deck hatches are now compulsory. Some people missed that before, but they weren't compulsory before. The use of the emergency desalinator in 22 will incur a 96-hour time penalty. Okay, so it's a 4-day time penalty. So if an entrant decides to crack open a little desalinator, they got a four-hour stop. So they're going to have to manage their water a bit better. Digital video cameras effectively are on for 22, so you're going to see a lot more interesting stuff. All the entrants will no doubt take up that opportunity. It's by application. There's a few little bits of fine print there, but you'll be all the boats in 22 will have digital video cameras, even drones. You know, if an entrant wants to fly a drone, that's fine. And next boat, all the boats must have at least 2 windows each side of the boat. So you remember Jean-Luc saying, oh, I want to get rid of my windows. Mark Slats didn't have windows. We've thought about this, and it's our opinion, talking to our people here, that windows are a safety feature. So you've got to have at least 2 windows on each side, 20 centimetres by 15 centimetres, only about that big, but we believe it's important to be able to look out the windows. So you will see compulsory windows for the next one. Secure permanent storage of spinnaker poles on deck. So both spinnaker poles have to have permanent secure storage on deck, so that if there's a storm coming, an entrant can take them down and strap them on deck. That'll be a recommendation, so if they get dismasted, they don't lose their jury rig. Next one is the emergency steering and rudder system trial. We're upgrading that. It's got to be they've got to do it for 5 hours. It's got to be done in triangular course, 1.5 miles long on each edge of the triangle, and it's got to be done in the open ocean with at least 15 knots of breeze at the time. You have to take spare chargers for the sat phone and the YB3, because you may remember and hear the stories where some of them didn't bring their spare chargers. Some chargers were damaged by salt water. If you can't charge your gear, you got a problem. So there'll be spare chargers required. The other one is we're upgrading the penalty for inappropriate use of satellite phones in 22. So your first offence on inappropriate use, if it can be shown there's no material assistance, it'll be a 36-hour time penalty for the first use, and the second use will be automatic Chichester without any recourse to time penalties. So you go straight to Chichester class. The other one is that, there's a few other little minor things, but there's some of the key elements, and we'll be upgrading the 22 Notice of Race on the website at the end of this month, and the real Notice of Race will be out on August the 22nd this year. So that's about it. Just remember, they've only got a couple of these left now, and they're nearly all gone. Thanks a lot, and I'll do a live tracker sometime in the next hour or so. Thanks a lot. See ya.